Welcome everybody, I'm your host Bryce Dolan and this is the Top Think Tanks Review. And today on the show, I hope to explain to you what it means to be a refugee. Now, President Trump is advocating for increased vetting for people entering the United States. And on our shows, we use the terms refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers quite often. Now, this could be confusing. Like me, you probably thought at one point that refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers were all the same thing, that they weren't any different, that it was just different names for the same group of people. Well, according to the Council on Foreign Relations, that is not accurate. Now, here is a video quickly explaining what's the difference between a migrant and a refugee. Now, the video is by the Council on Foreign Relations, so let's check it out. I hope you learned something new and are more enlightened on what it means to be a refugee, a migrant, or an asylum seeker. Now, on this same article posted by the Council on Foreign Relations, you can find a bunch of information like how long has the United States been letting refugees enter the country? How many refugees has the United States resettled? Where do these refugees come from? But there's one thing in particular in this article that I want to look at, and that's how are refugees screened and approved? Since this seems to be the major issue that President Trump is pushing for, that possibly some of these refugees could be terrorists. So this is what they have to do, ladies and gentlemen. The U.S. State Department, in consultation with a constellation of other agencies and organizations, manages the process through its Refugees Admissions Program, or USRAP. Now, according to the Council on Foreign Relations, potential refugees abroad most often begin by registering with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or the UNHCR. Now, the UNHCR officials collect documentation and perform an initial screening and then refer qualifying individuals to U.S. State Department Resettlement Support Centers, or RSCs, of which there are 9 offices around the world. Now, sometimes this referral is done by a U.S. embassy or another non-governmental organization. Now, the RSC officials then interview the applicants, verify their personal data, and submit their information for background checks by a suite of U.S. national security agencies. Now, these security checks include multiple forms of biometric screening, including cross-checks on global fingerprint databases and medical tests. Now, according to the Council on Foreign Relations, if none of these inquiries produce problematic results, including criminal histories, past immigration violations, connections to terrorist groups, or communicable diseases, the applicant can be cleared for entry to the United States. Now, the admissions process generally takes from 18 months to 2 years to complete. So if it sounds like a difficult, complicated, and long process to go through, you're right, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a wham bam thank you ma'am situation. It takes months to get through, at least 18 months to get through this entire process to gain entry into the United States. So after hearing that, I hope I may have swayed your views a little bit on how you think these refugees enter our country. Do we need more extreme vetting? It sounds like our process is pretty complicated already and does a pretty good job of sifting out the so-called would-be terrorists. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, these refugees go through this process And it's not just one organization, it's a conglomerate of organizations from the United States and around the world, making sure that these people are who they say they are, and that they're not admitting just any old terrorist into the country. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to look at this yourself, you can find a link directly to this article below in the description, and I encourage you, if you have any questions about immigrants, refugees, or asylum seekers, go look at this article and I bet you will get your questions answered. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, that way you can get notified every time a new video is posted. Give our Facebook pages a like and follow us on Twitter. But that does it for your Top Think Tanks review. I was your host, Bryce Dolan.